Let the district handle it. You're just a janitor. That's what the principal said when the power went out. But that night while the campus slept, he stayed rewiring panels with calloused hands and a limp in his step. No cameras. No, thanks, just lights back on by morning. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up to the school. A four-star general stepped out, and when he saw the janitor, he snapped to attention. If you believe quiet service deserves loud respect, comment respect below. Northgate High School operated on routines. Morning announcements at 8:05, lunch bells at 11:30, final dismissal at 3:15, and Mr. Victor Hale arriving at 5:30 a.m. Every day without fail. It's 68 Victor moved with the measured pace of a man who'd earned the right to take his time. His slate gray uniform hung neatly on his lean frame, and despite the limp that punctuated his stride, he navigated the school's corridors with quiet efficiency. The limp left leg, more pronounced on rainy days, offered the only hint that his body carried stories his voice never told. Most of the staff barely noticed him. Principal Elwood nodded absently when they passed in hallways. Teachers stepped around his yellow wet floor signs without looking up from their phones. He existed in the peripheral vision of their busy days, necessary but unremarkable. Morning, Mr. Hale called Aiden Martinez, a sophomore who always arrived early for basketball practice. Morning, Victor replied with a slight nod, a small smile warming his weathered face. Students noticed him more than the adults did. They saw how he fixed the sticky water fountain without being asked, how he remembered which lockers squeaked and oiled them during lunch hour, how he carried extra pencils in his pocket on test days. Friday afternoon brought heavy storm clouds, and with them trouble at 20:17 p.m. Just as fifth period began, the lights flickered once, twice, then died. Emergency systems activated briefly before failing as well. The building plunged into mid-afternoon darkness. Anxious chatter filled the hallways as teachers ushered students toward exits, illuminated only by phone flashlights. Principal Elwood's voice echoed through battery-powered bullhorns. Remain calm, early dismissal, bus riders to the gymnasium. Victor appeared at her side, flashlight in hand. Main junction box, probably tripped. I can let the district handle it. Principal Elwood interrupted, barely glancing his way. You're just a janitor. This requires licensed electricians. We'll call emergency services. Victor nodded, his expression unchanged. Yes, ma'am. He helped guide students outside, his flashlight beam steady despite the growing storm, while administrators made calls that went straight to voicemail. The storm had downed lines across the county. Victor quietly checked exit signs and emergency lighting. By 4:30 p.m., the building's empty, save for administrative staff. Principal Harmon locked her office with a frustrated sigh. Maintenance says Monday at the earliest. She told the remaining secretaries the storm's knocked out power to half the district. Will have to cancel Monday classes if it's not fixed. Victor stood nearby, mop hand. Have a good weekend. He offered simply. You too, Mr. Graham. She paused momentarily, forgetting his name. Hale, he supplied. Yes, of course. Lock up when you finish. The parking lot emptied. Rain intensified, and inside the darkened building, Victor set aside his mop and retrieved a different toolbox from beneath his supply cart. Older, heavier, with latches worn smooth from decades of use. He switched his flashlight to headlamp mode, securing it over his faded Oak Ridge high cap. Then he headed toward the basement utility room, his limp more pronounced after the long day, but his purpose unwavering. The weekend storm intensified overnight, pounding the school's roof with relentless fury. Lightning illuminated empty hallways in brief, ghostly flashes in the basement. Victor worked steadily, undisturbed by the tempest. Above his movements were methodical practice, tracing circuits, test connections, identifying exactly where water had infiltrated the aging electrical system. The school's infrastructure blueprints lay open beside him, but he rarely consulted them. His fingers seemed to know the pathways of current in circuit as intimately as his own. Pulse hours passed at 3:17 to me a.m. He located the problem, a corroded junction box where rainwater had finally broken through decades-old seals. Parts of the fix required materials he didn't have on hand. Without hesitation, he braved the storm, driving to a small apartment where larger tools and salvaged electrical components filled spare bedroom. By dawn, Victor had rewired the entire junction, installed proper weatherproofing, and restored power to the building. The ancient heating system hummed to life, dispelling the damp chill that had settled overnight. Emergency lights reset themselves, digital clocks blinked, awaiting programming. He swept up debris, returned tools to their proper places, and left no evidence of his night's labor beyond functioning lights. At 6:15 a.m., he changed back into his regular uniform and resumed his morning routine, checking bathrooms, unlocking classroom doors, polishing water fountains. When Principal Harmon arrived at 7:30, her surprise was evident. "The power's back," she exclaimed to the arriving secretaries. "District maintenance must have sent an emergency crew overnight. I didn't get any calls." Victor passed by with his cart. "Morning, ma'am." She barely nodded, already dialing the district office for confirmation. Monday morning brought clear skies and regular classes. Liam Reyes, a senior with an aptitude for engineering, noticed Victor wincing slightly as he reached for paper towels on a high shelf. "You okay, Mr. Hale?" Jordan asked, genuinely concerned. Victor smiled. "Just fine. Old bones and old wires don't always agree." Something in the phrase caught Jordan's attention. "Were you here when the power went out Friday?" "Someone has to keep an eye on things," Victor replied vaguely. Jordan's curiosity peaked with a free period before lunch. He found excuses to observe the janitor from a distance. He noticed how Victor tested loose doorknobs with precision, how he measured cleaning solution with the exactness of a chemist, how the multi-tool on his belt, nothing like standard issue maintenance equipment. Victor reached for his back pocket. The tool caught briefly on his belt. Jordan glimpsed engraving on its metal surface, not a brand name, but what looked like military identification. That afternoon, Jordan approached Mr. Paxton, the history teacher known for his Army service before teaching. "Mr. Paxton, can you look at something?" Jordan described the tool in the engraving pattern. Winter's interest was immediate. "Bring him by tomorrow. Say I need help with my cabinet." The next day, the stage encounter occurred naturally. Victor examined the teacher's locked cabinet, retrieved his multi-tool, and worked the jammed mechanism with practiced ease. Winters observed the tool carefully. His demeanor shifted subtly. "That's an old CK utility tool, military issue. Engineering Corps." Victor nodded, once his expression giving nothing away. "Long time ago." After Victor left, Winter sat at his computer searching databases available to veterans. By evening, his search revealed what the school had never known. Victor Hale, Chief Warrant Officer at U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 28 years of service, deployments to Iraq, Kosovo, Panama, specialized in critical infrastructure restoration under combat conditions. Bronze Star recipient, Distinguished Service Medal, known within military circles as Lights on Hale Free. Saw his ability to restore power to forward operating bases while under enemy fire. Winters made a call to an old Army friend, now at the Pentagon. 2 days later, a black government SUV with military plates pulled into the school's visitor parking. Students pressed against classroom windows, watching as a 4-star general emerged in full dress uniform. He walked directly into the building, bypassing the front office where Principal Harmon stood open-mouthed. "Sir, you need to sign in," she began. The general continued without pausing. "I know where I'm going." "Ma'am." He walked purposefully through hallways and down a maintenance corridor until he reached the storage closet where Victor was replacing light bulbs. Victor turned surprised, briefly crossing his normally composed features. The general snapped to attention and saluted Chief Warrant Officer Hale. "It's an honor to finally meet you in person." Victor straightened instinctively, decades of military bearing resurfacing in his posture at ease. "General," he said quietly, "I'm just a janitor now." The general shook his head. "You built more than bridges, sir. You kept men alive, including my son." Fallujah, 2007. That forward base would have been overrun without power for defenses around the corner. Students and teachers gathered, witnessing the impossible. 4-star general showing deference to the man who mopped their floors. "If you believe true service doesn't retire, come respect below." Lunch period. The story had spread throughout Oak Ridge High like wildfire. Students whispered in hallways, sneaking glances at Victor as he went about his duties. Teachers gathered in the lounge, piecing together what they'd witnessed with newfound curiosity about the quiet man who'd worked among them. For years, Principal Elwood sat in her office, a mix of embarrassment and awe, coloring her features as she scrolled through the service record. The general had left behind combat zones, infrastructure restoration under enemy fire, metal she'd never heard of, all belonging to the man she dismissed as just a janitor. Jordan, whose curiosity had helped unveil Victor's identity, approached him hesitantly in the cafeteria. "Mr. Hale," he began, "I didn't mean to intrude on your privacy. I just, no harm done." Victor replied, emptying a trash bin with the same care. "Always shown some stories just find their way out eventually." Local news caught wind of the visit. By afternoon, a reporter from the Oak Ridge Gazette appeared requesting an interview. Victor declined politely but firmly. The reporter wrote the story anyway. Janitor who rebuilt war zones fixes school grid in silence. The article detailed Victor's distinguished military career, his quiet heroism overseas, and how he'd saved the school thousands of dollars by repairing the electrical system during the storm, a fact confirmed by district maintenance personnel who'd inspected his work and pronounced better than code. By week's end, the ripple effect continued to spread. Veterans from surrounding communities began stopping by the school, asking to meet Victor between classes. One gray man in a wheelchair brought his teenage son specifically to introduce him. "This is the man who kept our convoy moving outside Baghdad," he told the boy when everyone else said the road was lost. "He restored power to the gates so we could get the wounded out." Victor acknowledged these visitors with quiet dignity, never elaborating on their stories, never seeking the spotlight their presence created. The student council, led by Jordan, petitioned for a special assembly to honor Victor. He initially refused. "I don't need recognition for doing my job," he told Jordan. "It's not about what you need," Jordan replied with unexpected wisdom. "It's about what we need to understand what real service looks like." Victor relented though. He requested the assembly be brief and focus on veteran service generally rather than his specifically. The auditorium filled beyond capacity that Friday. Mr. Paxton had prepared a presentation showing images of infrastructure projects in combat zones, bridges rebuilt under impossible conditions, power stations restored while fighting continued in nearby military bases, illuminated against encroaching darkness. When the general returned, this time with two colleagues, Victor sat uncomfortably on stage, hat in hands, eyes downcast as the presentation continued. A slideshow display photographs of a younger Victor, lean and focused, directing engineering operations in desert fatigues. The general presented Victor with a plaque that read, "For service in silence and strength." The student body rose in spontaneous standing ovation and honor. Oak Ridge High, typically reserved for championship sports teams, Principal Elwood approached the microphone, visibly moved. "Mr. Hale has taught us all something about dignity and duty this week," she said, "and on behalf of the administration I want to apologize for the times we've overlooked the extraordinary individual working among us." District superintendent, present for the occasion, offered Victor a position as facility supervisor for the entire school system, complete with substantial salary increase in official recognition of his expertise. Victor listened, thanked him sincerely, and declined. "I've got what I need," he explained simply. Later, when Principal Harmon privately repeated her apology for dismissing his offer to help during the power outage, Victor just smiled gently. "It's all right," he said. "Lights are on now. That's what matters." The media attention eventually faded. Reporters found newer stories to chase. But Oak Ridge High had fundamentally changed, not just in how they viewed Victor Hale, but in how they considered services. So teachers incorporated lessons about infrastructure and conflict zones. The engineering club tripled in membership. College essays mentioned the janitor who taught students more about honor than any textbook could convey. And in the halls of Oak Ridge High, students began to notice the invisible people who made their world function. Cafeteria workers, bus drivers, crossing guards, people whose stories they'd never bothered to learn. Life at Oak Ridge High gradually returned to its familiar rhythms. Victor continued his daily rounds. Same gray uniform, same measured pace, same attention to details others overlooked, but subtle differences emerged in how the school responded to his presence. Teachers greeted him by name. Students stopped to help when they saw him carrying heavy supplies. The faculty lounge, once off limits to non-teaching staff, now had a chair unofficially reserved for him. Though he rarely accepted the invitation to join them, small tokens of appreciation began appearing on his maintenance card: a care-folded origami crane, a handwritten note of thanks for fixing a stuck locker, a gift card to the local diner where he sometimes ate breakfast alone. One card, unsigned but written in careful handwriting, simply stated, "You're the reason I want to serve." Another, from the AP physics class, read, "You taught us what duty looks like when no one's watching." Victor kept each one stored carefully in the same worn box where he kept his military commendations. The school board, despite Victor's refusal of a promotion, insisted on recognizing his contribution. Small bronze plaque was installed above the main hallway's electrical panel, restored in silence by one who rebuilt under fire. Victor ran his fingers over the engraving once, nodded to himself, and returned to work without comment. Liam Reyes, whose curiosity had started the revelation, received his acceptance letter to West Point that spring. When his English teacher asked what had inspired his application, Jordan's answer was immediate. Mr. Hale made me realize that engineering isn't just about building things, it's about maintaining what matters even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. Each year afterward, Oak Ridge High observed Veterans Day differently. Rather than generic assemblies with distant speakers, they began a tradition of lighting candles along the path from the main entrance to the maintenance office. Quiet tribute to service rendered without fanfare. Victor never attended these ceremonies. He watched, distance mop in hand, continuing his duties as students placed their candles and observed moments of silence. One November evening, as the last students departed after placing their candles, Principal Elwood found Victor methodically removing wax from the hallway tiles. "You could join them, you know," she suggested gently. "They'd like that." Victor straightened, easing the stiffness in his back. His eyes reflected the remaining candlelight as he considered her words. "Some stories don't need retelling," he finally said, just remembering. As years passed, Victor's limp became more pronounced. His pace slowed. Eventually, retirement became inevitable. At his modest going away, gathering 3 generations of Oak Ridge students returned to shake his hand. His replacement received detailed instructions on every aspect of the building's maintenance, except for the electrical system. That knowledge Victor shared only with Liam Reyes, who returned from military service, specifically to learn it. "Why me?" Jordan asked. Victor's answer was characteristically brief, but contained everything that mattered. "Because you notice what needed fixing, and that's where all good service begins." Subscribe to Steel Heart Stories if you believe real honor doesn't ask for attention, it earns it in silence.